Welcome, everybody, to The Rundown. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Zender, physical therapist and fitness expert and enthusiast. And there's a lot of options out there, folks, just life in general. But today we're talking all the different options for your fitness, for your health, any sort of routine or workout that you want to engage in. Pretty much anything exists nowadays. And I get the question a lot, which one is the best? Which one is the best mode of exercise, or what should I be doing? How should I be working out in general? And most people want a very black and white answer. We'll go into much more detail on why that might not necessarily be the case. I mean, some things are certainly black and white in this area, but there's a much more nuance and complexity to it, of course. But the question can come from somebody who maybe is completely unfamiliar with exercise and is just starting out on a fitness journey, we'll call it. Maybe they recognize that there are certain attributes in their health or their lifestyle or just their mental, spiritual, physical well-being that they want to change, and that's where the question comes from. Just genuine naivety, we'll say. And I mean that in a positive way, because they're trying to learn, of course, trying to be informed. But otherwise, it can also come from a place of disgruntlement. Maybe you're an individual who's been active for most or all of your life, but right now you're at a spot where it just feels like you're not very satisfied, not very fulfilled with what you're doing, and just not enjoying it. And then taking care of yourself and being active can feel very much like a burden. And then the question becomes, well, what else is out there? There's got to be something different that I can do. And hopefully you get to that point versus just saying, well, if it just isn't fun to work out right now, then I'm just going to stop, because that's the worst case scenario, is to stop moving. But there are a lot of different options out there, of course, and there are different characteristics and attributes to each one that they need to be considered. So let me preface the talk today, the episode, by saying that I am by no means going to target one form or two forms, really any specific form of exercise as necessarily good or bad. I have my own biases. I will be explicit about sharing those. But the goal here is not to attack certain groups and start some internet tribal riot of different modalities going after each other, exercise forms going after each other. If it happens, let's just make sure it wasn't my fault, okay? The internet's going to do what it's going to do. But really the point here is just to be informative and to be helpful and, potentially inspiring for people who might feel a little bit lost or hopeless. I think really it comes down to when you're deciding what kind of exercise to be doing, or what maybe gym to join, for example, what community to be a part of. There's a couple questions that you need to answer. And the main one is, what's the point for me? Like, what is my why? Am I trying to be competitive in something? Am I trying to improve a very specific part of my health? Is there a function that, like, throughout the day that I want to be better at? If it's work related, or just being able to be more mobile in your home or community, maybe some recreational activity that you want to be better at. Ultimately, what is your goal? What is your goal, and what is the end point that you hope to get to? And I say that sort of tongue in cheek because, again, health and fitness is not really an end point, right? It's not like we just exercise or take care of ourselves for a month or a year or even 5 or 10 years and then say, all right, good, I've put my investment in the bank and now I can just kind of rest on my laurels and never take care of myself and never exercise again, right? It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, as nice as that would be. So we really have to embrace the fact that this is going to be something long term, right? This is something that if we're serious about it, we want to stick with. And that leads into the second question, which is different than what is the goal or what is the point, but secondly, what can I stick with? What am I okay with sacrificing each week, as far as time, as far as effort, as far as commitment to whatever that activity is? Because falling off of a program is never going to help, regardless of the different health benefits and the different pros and cons and all that. If you're not doing anything, that's the worst workout program you can stick with, right? So you really have to ask yourself and be honest about what is practical, what am I willing to do right now. Your ability or your willpower to sacrifice 30 to 60 minutes early on in your fitness journey is going to be very different than somebody who has been doing it for maybe years or decades, because at that point it's becoming much more of a natural habit, right? And then the idea of sacrifice, quote unquote, is really no longer a factor. It doesn't feel like sacrifice once it becomes a habit and becomes part of your life. It feels like something you have to do, right? It's almost a sacrifice to not do it. But early on, again, when you're considering options and considering what can I do for my routine, it's going to feel probably a little bit like sacrifice, and that's okay. Acknowledge that's okay. That's normal and human. But then also be honest with yourself of saying, okay, I'm not going to maybe bite off more than I can chew just to end up quitting, a week or two or a month into it. Figure out something that you can actually stay with. So I'll first introduce the topic here, introduce the different exercise modalities by saying that currently in my routine, and it's certainly changed quite a bit as I was, in traditional athletics in high school, football, wrestling, track, played a year of football at Concordia in Mequon here where I went to school, and then quit from that for various reasons, and then got into Olympic weightlifting, and then over the last 3 years now I've been doing CrossFit, and the last 1 year, in the last about 12 months exactly, have been doing jiu-jitsu as well. So that's currently where I'm at. A couple days a week of doing CrossFit, a couple days a week of doing jiu-jitsu, and then on the weekends trying to keep up with the kids too, using them like free weights and kettlebells and swinging them around and all that. So that's my routine, and I say that to kind of frame the conversation here. I suppose it's more of just a discussion, right? Because, or maybe just a speech, I suppose. Conversation might imply that somebody else is talking back to me, which you can certainly do in the comments, but right now I'm just sharing my thoughts here. But anyways, I'm saying this to frame the point of what I'm saying, in that my program right now, what works for me right now, while I believe strongly in it, and that's why I do it, of course, is not what I would say everybody has to do or should do. And there's going to be a lot of reasons why doing either CrossFit or Jiu-Jitsu or a couple other things for somebody would not work. And we'll get into the specifics on those. But let's start with CrossFit because I'm familiar with it, segueing into kind of what I'm doing into what others can do. And also, I think it has, for various reasons, better or worse, has been sort of a figure of controversy over the past couple of years, especially. But I think that there's much more nuance to it, and there's much more complexity surrounding it if you actually participate in it and really look at the details of what goes into CrossFit methodology versus from an outside perspective, an observer's perspective. It may just look as like sort of a Neanderthalic workout method, and maybe some days it is. It's always fun to lean into that, meathead sort of persona at times. But there really is a lot of benefit to it as far as carrying over the effects of the gym into your regular lifestyle, right? So for me, what I have found to be very insightful with it, and let me also give it a disclaimer that I am not a certified CrossFit coach, so I'm not the expert as far as understanding all of the complexities of the methodology. Yes, I have an exercise science background from undergraduate and PT doctorate, of course, and so that helps. But again, just to be transparent, there's a lot more to it that if you want to be formally trained in CrossFit and expert there, I would talk to a higher level coach. But anyways, and this is coming as well from somebody who used to, when I was Olympic weightlifting, used to kind of bash CrossFit, which again, stereotypically is the case, right? It's using Olympic weightlifting movements, but at a higher volume, and people like to kind of trash the form and the technique and the coaching and all that. And, in general, in large part, a lot of that's just good-natured memeing online, so no big deal. But I think at times, as with any exercise mode or form, sometimes people can be swayed away from it because they start to get a certain impression of any sort of exercise modality based on the memes or the stereotypes. So in general, again, CrossFit, if you're not familiar, there is a specific definition, but not being a certified coach, I don't have it specifically off the top of my head. Essentially, what the methodology uses is variable functional movements at high intensities. And the whole idea is to prepare you for life and to create that sense of variety so that no matter what life throws at you, you're prepared for it. So it's not simply just weightlifting or just lifting heavy weights. It's not just strictly cardio. There's some gymnastics thrown in there. There's a lot of different variable movements, and the workout schemes as well are also highly variable. So, whereas traditional, bodybuilding, let's say, might be X sets of X reps for 6 different movements, and that's your workout for the day. There's some variability throughout the years. CrossFit is very different in that some workouts are standardized, but a lot of them are variable in terms of the rep scheme. And the whole idea there is to prepare you for life. Maybe some days or weeks or months, you need that extra strength to get through your day-to-day function, but you also have to have a cardiovascular base. Flexibility goes with it, of course, too. Gymnastics, just for really movement confidence, I would say. So point is, there's a bunch of different factors. It's not that you're specializing necessarily in one specific thing. So that for me has been a lot of fun. I'm very much somebody who, perhaps you might say is quote unquote ADHD when it comes to the exercise piece. I am not personally a runner. We'll get into running and some of the pros and cons with that as we were doing for all of these here. But I'm not somebody that can just stick with the same task for hours and hours. Kudos to you if you can. I know a lot of runners. I work with a lot of runners. I have a lot of respect for the work and dedication that goes into that. But for me, it's just, it doesn't fit well with my mentality. So I really like the variability piece. I recognize that there's benefits to, and there's an importance to having cardiovascular fitness or a certain base of that. But, not liking the cyclical, repetitive type of exercise. I prefer more of that high intensity piece. And from the research, we can see that there's very comparable benefits in many ways between the longer duration exercise and high intensity. And so for me, it's really, it fits well. It fits well, but it also has the functional strength piece that's helpful being, excuse me, dad to young kids, being able just to play with them, toss them around and all that, and being able to help out at home and, move things, lift things. So I really like it, plus the brevity of the workouts, right? And, you can have a really intense workout in 5 to 10 minutes. And that part is huge too. Unfortunately, not at a point in life anymore. Before kids, maybe I was, where I had 2 to 3 hours at a time that I could spend just doing Olympic weightlifting. My wife hated that, by the way. She was working out with me and for a little bit before we had kids. I think we made it like 2 weeks, and then she's like, I can't do this anymore. So not because it was like too intense. If anything, it was like too much rest time. She felt like just sitting around and waiting to hit one single heavy rep was not engaging enough. So, which a lot of people do. I don't blame anybody for doing that. It's kind of the whole point here is, find what fits for you. So CrossFit for me, again, and for anybody who's similar minded and that you like that variety, you don't want to be bored, that variability is super helpful. You're going to be checking a lot of boxes for different physical and health domains, right? The high intensity piece I think is important. I would argue that, everybody should have some exposure to that each month, or, better yet, each week, but at least each month that high intensity exposure is important. The strength piece, not just for muscle strength, but bone intensity or bone density, excuse me, tendon integrity, all of these things. And then again, the gymnastics piece is fun because that's more of a movement confidence is how I might describe that. So not being afraid to necessarily put your body in different positions, trying new things. There's always something new and difficult to try. And so for all of those reasons, I think CrossFit has been very fun for me and very beneficial. But some of the drawbacks, again, is that it is so variable that you're not really specializing in any one thing. So if we typically took, typical CrossFitter and put them up against maybe a bodybuilder or powerlifter or some other like strength athlete, they're probably not going to be on average as strong as that other athlete. And it's not to say that CrossFitters aren't strong. Games athletes, go watch them. Those are the best of the best. They're going to be very strong individuals, but that's not the norm, of course. And then conversely, if we evaluate like cardiovascular fitness, are you going to be as improved as or as cardiovascularly fit aerobically, anaerobically fit as a runner, for example, a marathon runner? Probably not. Again, because that idea of specificity isn't there as much, right? Runners are doing this one task very well. CrossFitters get a little bit of that, but not quite the same. So again, that's you could argue a benefit or a drawback. It's, I think, important to have the variability. But if you're somebody who wants to be kind of specialized in one thing, or there's one domain of fitness that's very important to you, I think, again, it's probably important to have a certain sense of variety. But if you want to really emphasize one domain, then CrossFit might not be the best for you. Or maybe you're somebody who likes to have that consistent movement, like running, or like Pilates, as we'll get into here next, where it's a little bit more slow, controlled, endurance sort of related type of activity. CrossFit might not be ideal for you, and so it's important to consider, like, what are we getting versus what are we not getting in each modality. So on the other side of the spectrum, we get into Pilates, and this is really the next thing I think of, because the CrossFit gym that I go to, CrossFit Woolly Mammoth in Mequon, check it out. Go there, drop in. It's a good place. Nice time. It's right next to Club Pilates, right across the hall, if you will. And it always just kind of strikes me as sort of the hot and cold, the yin and the yang of fitness in a way. Not, again, because one is better or worse. It's just very different methodologies and different environments. So Pilates, and I've actually done a couple of Pilates classes myself a few years ago. Very nice time. This is at Club Pilates. And it's very different because, number one, for me anyways, the first thing I noticed was the pacing. Was very much something I'm not used to. Coming from a football and wrestling background, doing CrossFit, now doing jiu-jitsu, this kind of high intensity, push yourself to the max briefly type thing and then rest is what I have been used to physically and mentally. And Pilates is very different. Pilates is much more about body control, kind of keeping your movements slow and steady, but moving through full range and challenging the muscles, at various lengths, and challenging your mind too. And it's definitely a workout, and I did the easy kind of intermediate, or not even intermediate, the introductory class. So of course it's only going to get harder as you go through the levels. But it was very insightful because it kind of challenged my mind to think about the benefits of different types of exercises, maybe doing things that you're not familiar with or not used to. And again, that being the first time that I had ever tried Pilates, I can see how many people find a sort of sense of not just relief, but joy and feeling sustained and feeling fulfilled from doing an activity like that, having their mind cleared from a calmer, slower paced, but still challenging exercise modality. I think was very, very fascinating and very interesting to embrace that. From the clinical perspective too, actually Pilates is one of the things that comes up pretty consistently in the literature, especially when it comes to back pain. It's been shown to be one of the most effective treatments for managing or reducing back pain. And that could be for a lot of reasons. It's not to say that nobody in Pilates has back pain, and if you have back pain, that's the first thing you should go to. There's, of course, much more complexity to research than just that. But the point is that there are a lot of clinical benefits and also a lot of fitness benefits as well too. Definitely on the flexibility side of things, feeling having a certain degree of local muscle endurance, at least from holding certain positions, mentally as well, all the benefits that come with those. But again, as everything has, there are some drawbacks too. So typically the movements are going to be, especially if they're reformer-based movements and you're lying supine or quadruped, the degree of loading through your musculoskeletal system is not going to be quite as much as traditional bodybuilding or weightlifting or CrossFit, things like that. The external load is not quite as high. And so you can make the argument that benefits on the musculoskeletal system may not be as high compared to other heavier base forms of resistance training. And then the other thing potentially being the limited exposure to type 2 fiber adaptations, so power movements, plyometrics. And Again, this is coming from somebody who has just a little bit of exposure to Pilates and has talked with and worked with people who have gone through Pilates. So I do know that there are certain class types that are going to incorporate some form of plyometrics to an extent, but it doesn't tend to be the vast majority of the time, and the consistency and exposure to those kinds of things is a little bit more limited. And that's one of the things that maybe gets disregarded, I would say, most prevalently as we age, is the importance of doing things quickly, right? We think athletes, of course, need to be able to move fast and be agile, but we don't think of our 70, 80, 90-year-old citizens in this country that they should be able to do that. And as a PT, I would argue the opposite. I think if anybody needs fast, plyometric, power-based movements, it is the elderly, because that's one of the first things that fades in our nervous system and our musculoskeletal system is our ability to move quickly, and that leads to a whole host of issues. The most significant one is falls, and all the costs and the mortality that goes along with that. So again, is the point of me saying this that any form of exercise, Pilates in this case, harmful or contributing to these downsides? Of course not. I think it's just important that you consider, okay, what is the main thing I'm getting out of this exercise modality, and are there any other things that I should maybe supplement with or not? But a lot of good benefits to Pilates or Pilates types of classes and types of fitness, specifically in the specifically in the flexibility world, feeling confident with movement through a full range, and the mental clarity as well. I would argue are probably the main benefits in my opinion. So good to always consider again prior to going into those class sessions. But thirdly, let's go kind of right in the middle. So more into the traditional bodybuilding strength training routine. You maybe call it like a commercial gym routine. This would be what probably most people start with, when they're first starting out some sort of fitness journey, or if you're in middle school or high school, kind of getting introduced to the idea of being active and strength training and running and all of this, is we think of it very kind of very linearly, right? Almost like operating in silos. Like I do my cardio, and then I do my strength, and then maybe I stretch for 5 minutes, and then I hit the showers and I leave. Usually independent, people just kind of coming and going before work, after work, whatever, on breaks. That's a lot of how we view the idea of being fit and active and taking care of ourselves in this country, which is totally great. There are no reasons why you can't do that. The pros, of course, are that you're in control and you can, assuming you have access to all the equipment you might need, whether you're at a gym or at your home, that you can address all of those components. You can weight train. You can benefit your musculoskeletal system with adequate amounts of loading. Of course, you could stretch if you have the space to do that. If you have equipment, or even if you don't, you could, go for a run around your house, or you could use the treadmill or the elliptical, what have you. And the flexibility of being able to kind of be in control of that, I think is very helpful. So a lot of pros there. From a physiological perspective, we can easily tick all the boxes. I think one of the drawbacks, though, of thinking of traditional commercial gym training, we'll say, as the best kind or the only kind of fitness, is that we can feel boxed into being subject to the limitations of that system and of that environment. So for example, if I block off in my mind that, okay, my workout's going to be 90 minutes, maybe you get to the gym and it's packed one day. I know this happens all the time. This happened to me, years ago when I was in this type of a routine. It would just be so full, or something happens and I'm just, not really in the mood. And so I feel like, well, I needed 90 minutes and now I can't really get everything in 90 minutes. So I'm just going to go home and forget about the workout. Right. And even if you have 60 minutes or 45 minutes, you feel like, well, just kind of, ruin the routine I had, because in my head, I have this kind of pattern boxed down. And that's what I had to do. I have to hit my weights. I have to hit my treadmill or my elliptical, and then I have to stretch afterwards. And if I don't do all of those, then I just do none of them. And so that's a common mindset that I've heard and I've observed as well in people. And again, unfortunately, if that's as far as our idea of fitness and taking care of ourselves goes, it becomes much more challenging to actually stay consistent with a plan, because life is not going to generally, for most of us, always going to allow for that much time or that kind of consistency in schedule. But the other thing is, even if the timing piece isn't an issue for you, generally speaking, unless you're in classes at the gym, you're oftentimes just lifting or working out by yourself. And I think that idea of working with other people, being motivated, being pushed by people right beside you who are going through the same experience that you are, I think it's a very important human characteristic that we have that. And it's not to say that you can't motivate yourself, of course. I mean, I like to think that I'm very intrinsically motivated, extrinsically as well. I mean, who doesn't like, winning or getting some reward? But intrinsically as well, I think I have a certain degree of that, and many other people do as well. But it always is going to ramp us up a notch as humans if the person next to us or the people all around us are doing a little bit more, and we can observe that and feel pushed beyond our comfort zone or beyond where we might go if we're by ourselves. So the ultimate point here being that if you can be surrounded by a community of people who are going to push you and encourage you to do things, not in an unintelligent or unsafe way, but in a progressive and systematic way that's actually going to improve your fitness and maximize it over time, I think there's a lot of benefits to doing that versus thinking that you can only work out by yourself or you only prefer to work out by yourself, because there I think you're leaving a lot of potential on the table. So again, not to say that it's ever bad to work out by yourself. And the point of this is not to pick absolutes. The point of it is mostly just to describe the pros and the cons, the benefits, maybe drawbacks of each kind, and realize what you're getting versus what maybe you're not getting with each type, and supplement as you can. And then another example with that is running, as we touched on. So you can have this kind of mixture of this commercial gym training program, including weights and stretching and all of that. But maybe you're somebody who just wants to run. And again, if you're competing in that, that's very different than really the point of my talk here. Because obviously, if you're competing, you need to train that. You need to be better at running. You need to be the best at running specifically as you can be. Just like any sport, it doesn't make sense that if I want to be the best quarterback that I can be, that I also throughout the year practice my pitching for baseball and practice my triple jump and practice my whatever, pick any sport. You need to be able to practice the skills most pertinent to the thing you want to be best at. But let's just take a step back and focus more on just the general runner for fitness purposes. Obviously, we're going to have a high degree of cardiovascular benefit, and that can come from either high intensity runs or lower intensity, long duration runs. We see a lot of benefits at each intensity, whether it's increased cardiac efficiency, cardiac output, VO2 max, of course, capillarization in our periphery so that our blood flow is more balanced. It's more effective systemically as well. And then at the high intensity, we get a little bit, stronger contraction of the cardiac muscle, and, improved efficiency to more anaerobic workouts as well, or anaerobic environments throughout our day to day. That being the most obvious. Mentally, though, of course, you can get some benefits too by trying to push yourself to increase your pacing, push yourself to last a little bit longer in your runs than you had previously. So that mental aspect as well is always critical, really across all these domains. But of course, we're going to be limited in our ability to challenge our musculoskeletal system in different ways. So having a limited amount of strength training, I think, can limit the ability of our bone density, especially as we age, to increase or at least be maintained. Our absolute strength output is not going to be higher necessarily from running. Now, if you start from doing absolutely nothing for 30 years of your life and then you start running, we'll probably feel a little bit stronger just from the neural adaptations. But after a while, that's going to plateau. And really, the only way to get stronger is to challenge your body to increase your force output, which is difficult to do just with running, especially distance running. And so there's some limited benefits there then too. Again, is the point here just to bash on that? No. I think running is definitely valuable. It has its place. But if that's all we box ourselves into for 7 days a week for the rest of our lives and think, well, this is how I have to be healthy. This is what it means to be healthy, and to exercise is to go for a run and be huffing and puffing. And if I'm not, passed out or on all fours by the end of it, that I didn't do anything for my body, I didn't, improve my fitness or take care of myself, then it's easy to fall off of that track and lose motivation, because that's hard to do. And honestly, we're probably not even benefiting ourselves as much anyway. Even if you do push through that mental piece, there's all of the other physical pieces, as I mentioned, specifically with musculoskeletal system, that we're not getting, that we could get by supplementing with other types of exercise as well. So again, good to consider the benefits really across the board. And then we could really summarize everything else as sort of a conglomerate or maybe a combination of the two. I mentioned jujitsu before, and there's a lot of people that do that as a form of exercise. I like to do that as well for the exercise, but I also like it more for the competitive side of things. So for me, I approach it a little bit differently. It is important to have, for me, that higher intensity piece. Again, I like the benefits of that. But if you're somebody who is considering just some form of exercise, or some form of movement, let's say, for the sake of exercise, your mentality around jujitsu, for example, or some other sport, basketball or swimming or whatnot, might be a little bit different than the person who wants to actually be more towards the competitive side. And I don't say that meaning like I'm trying to be a world champion or anything, but having a wrestling background, that part of my mind is more activated by jujitsu. Plus, it's fun, honestly, just to kind of be in these different positions. And at this stage of my life, having young kids, being able to roll around and play with them is always fun too. So part of that for me is just being able to stay loose and limber. But of course, if you don't have that background, or you don't have kids, or if that's not necessarily an important factor of your life, then that activity specifically may not be the most relevant to you. Swimming, I mentioned before, as another example too. I think swimming has a lot of fantastic benefits, cardiovascularly specifically, confidence with being in different environments, the mental fortitude to push through that. Something I very much do not have in the water. I took swim lessons until I was maybe seven-ish. Past them all, I can stay alive, but not efficient by any means. Don't prefer to be in the pool unless it's waist down. The water, anyways, is no more than waist deep. So if I have to be in the water, I can do it. But for me, that would not be really a sustainable form of exercise that is going to benefit my cardio that much, because it's not something that I really enjoy doing right now at this form of my life. And somebody hearing that might say, like, well, that just means you should be doing that, right? The idea of doing things that make you uncomfortable, I do agree with. I think is important. But my point here in saying this is, don't feel like you have to be forced into doing something that is purely fear-based, and then discourages you from doing it at all. Because the whole point here, as we're talking about, is what can you actually sustain and stay motivated with. Eventually it'll get to a point where, yeah, maybe doing some like small doses of swimming will be doable for me in my schedule, and I can actually get to a pool. And, as the kids get a little bit older, it's more practical in life to be able to introduce that, slowly get better at it. But again, the point is always why. What is your goal? For me, it's mostly about just checking the boxes, making sure that I have adequate strength, and cardiovascular base, so I'm not getting fatigued just with, again, playing with the kids or doing basic things throughout the house, and just that I feel happy and joyful with my exercise. And where I'm at right now is a good fit for me. Is that going to change 5, 10, 20 years from now? Maybe, who knows? But right now I feel really good about the routine I have, and that's what I hope anybody watching this also gets to as well. So really, when it comes down to it, again, always audit yourself mentally before you consider like what form of exercise is going to be best for me. Always go back to number one, the why. What is the point of me doing this? Am I doing this because I want to compete in anything, and have some sort of external reward? Or is it more internal? Is it something that is within me that I want to improve, maybe some obstacle, some hurdle, some challenge, whatnot. And then secondly, what can I actually sustain? What is doable for me? Your life and your schedule is not going to be the same as the people next to you or your coworkers or your family members. So while they may have a schedule that works for them, and maybe, to put it bluntly, maybe, yeah, they are doing more than you. That's the case. I'm not I'm not working out the most in the world. There's people that work out way more than me. But again, you got to do what fits your lifestyle and what fits your schedule, and it's something that you can actually sustain, because that's always going to be much more effective than trying something that you can't sustain or that you don't really want to do or that's motivating, so that you fall off of it. And then again, thirdly, I would say is having that sense of community. I think is always important. I see too many people that will maybe pick some form of exercise and then start to drop off because they don't connect with the people around them, or maybe they're trying something that is by themselves and they have nobody to support them or nobody to motivate them. Especially since I've started CrossFit and now Jiu-Jitsu and done more group classes, coming from a more traditional strength-based routine where I'm just training by myself in the gym. I found a lot of value in being with like-minded individuals that are addressing a common goal and can help you get further to where you want to be, as you can help them as well. So really just consider all of those options. There's not one best form of exercise. I think the main thing is to supplement and really check all of those fitness boxes as you go through all of the options, depending on what is best for you, schedule wise and motivation wise. Think of exercise as literally, supplements. What am I not getting enough of that I need some of? Some of us, as life goes on, you might need to focus more on your cardiovascular training. Others might need to focus more on improving their bone density or improving their balance, or having reduced stress in their life. And some forms of exercise for each person are going to work much better than others. So, really don't box yourself into thinking that only one form is best, or that once you start on a track, you have to stay there forever. I've come to really appreciate a lot of the cardiovascular benefits out of the exercise that I do, because the heart disease and coronary artery disease specifically in my family is very prevalent, and that's something that I want to be aware of. I want to take care of my heart. I want to make sure that I'm investing in that part of my health and fitness now, so that I don't look back 20, 30 years from now wishing that I would have been making better decisions. But if I only think that running is the best way to do it, again, being not a runner or not a swimmer, it can be very easy for me to say, like, oh, well, it's not something I'm motivated with, and so I'm just never going to do it. But there's a lot of other ways to tick off those boxes physiologically and get those benefits out of different forms of exercise. And that's really the important piece is, keep your mind open. Don't be afraid to sort of sample different things throughout life as different phases of life come on. But always be sure that you're doing something and staying motivated to stay consistent, and never stop exercising. And that's the biggest thing that I hope everybody takes away from this, is that there's an option out there for everybody. And no matter what your goal is, or no matter what your schedule or your lifestyle is, something out there exists. You just got to try a bunch of different things, find what works for you, and then just keep sticking with it.